Hello, my dear friends. How are you doing? Hope you are having an amazing day and not having to deal with drama. Ready for new stories I have for you today? Let's go to the first one. And don't forget to listen to the end of the story, guys, to hear my insights. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment. Sorry for my English. It's not my native language. My post is going to be about 2 weddings and karma. My husband John, 40 male, and I, 35 female, are from Europe. Not from the touristy western part, but from a poor, non-EU country. And now we live in an EU country. This will be relevant later. When we got engaged 10 plus years ago and started planning our wedding, we both wanted a very simple, small wedding, with only our close family and friends. There are many traditions in our culture related to weddings that do not really make sense, especially in today's age. One such tradition is that the parents, both, pay for their children's wedding 50-50. So they generally have a say in the wedding, and our parents, initiated by my mother-in-law, decided that we should have a big wedding in order to avoid offending distant family members and friends. Since John and I could not have the intimate wedding we wanted, and we did not pay for anything, we let most of the decisions be made by our parents because we just wanted to get married and we didn't want to fight with our parents. My dress and the church where we would get married were the only things that I insisted on. From the very beginning, my mother-in-law and my husband's younger sister, 17 at the time, tried to force their ideas and style on me and my family. The first issue was with the dress. It's a tradition that the groom's family pays for the bridal gown, and the bride's family pays for the groom's tuxedo. I already had a dress in mind that I loved and wanted to wear at my wedding, but my mother-in-law and sister-in-law made rude comments about it and tried to convince me to try on and buy a different one that was more to their taste. Very puffy, fluffy, and full of sparkling embellishments, which is not my style. At my mother's encouragement, she was in the same position when she was getting married and she caved to her sister-in-law, which she later deeply regretted. I very politely told them that my decision was final, and my parents offered to pay for my dress. But my mother-in-law declined, saying it's tradition. So finally, they seemed to make their peace with it. But they were very unhappy about the fact that I didn't cave to them. Also, due to tradition, my sister-in-law was my maid of honor, and my brother became John's best man. It is usually the bride who picks the color scheme of the wedding, so my sister-in-law asked me about the color of the dress she should be wearing. I told her to go with whatever color she felt comfortable in, except for white and bright shades of pink, which I generally don't like. 1 week before the wedding, my sister-in-law came up to me and, in a fake apologetic tone, told me that she bought a dress that looked beautiful on her. But unfortunately, it was bright pink. I was like, okay, not that I could do anything about it now. So I let it go. I must also admit that I had already expected some petty move from them, so I was not surprised. And I knew that bright pink would stick out like a sore thumb at our wedding, and it would not look good on her. So I was like, if you want to look hideous, who am I to stop you? The second issue was with the church. My husband was baptized Catholic, and I am from a Protestant family. My husband did not practice his religion at the time of our wedding, and since I was a practicing Protestant, we had already decided that we would attend a Protestant church after we got married. I regularly attended the church in my small town. It is an 800-year-old, beautiful small church, used to be Catholic before the 1500s, where my grandpa served as a pastor, and my parents also had their ceremony there. So, because of both sentimental and practical reasons, it was natural that we would also have our ceremony there. By the way, it's also a tradition that the church ceremony is in the bride's church, but my mother-in-law did not really seem to care about this particular tradition, and she insisted that her son was Catholic, so he should have his wedding in a Catholic church, officiated by a Catholic priest. This was a long-standing dispute, but then John suggested that we invite a Catholic priest to my church and have him tell the Catholic wedding vow so his mother would shut up. That's what we did. But of course my mother-in-law was not satisfied with that and was furious that we played her. The third issue was my brother. My, at the time, 17-year-old sister-in-law had a huge crush on my 22-year-old brother, best man. My brother did not like my sister-in-law because he thought she was a spoiled brat and would have never dated her, also due to her age, of course. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law thought that our wedding would pose a great opportunity to fix my sister-in-law up with my brother. Bear in mind that my sister-in-law actually had a boyfriend at the time and we invited him to our wedding. But surprise, surprise, she dumped him right before the wedding. They didn't know that my brother had a girlfriend, now his wife and best sister-in-law, by the way, whom he was taking to the wedding. My mother-in-law was livid when she learned that my brother had a date for the wedding and insisted that I disinvite his girlfriend because it was his job to entertain her daughter at the reception. Of course, I didn't do that, and John also thought it was a ridiculous request, so my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were furious. But we didn't care at this point. There were other issues regarding the venue, decorations, etc. When it came to the reception venue, I suggested a place that was pretty and very photogenic with a lake view. My parents were on board with it, but my mother-in-law said it was too expensive, so we did not press the issue any further. My mother-in-law chose the venue, and it was hideous, but at that point, I was like, whatever. My parents and I wanted to hire a wedding decorator for the venue and the church, but my mother-in-law didn't want that either, because in her opinion, it was a waste of money. My parents did hire a decorator for the church though, but my mother-in-law only learned about it when she entered the church on the day of, and even though she did not have to pay for any of it as it was a gift from my parents, she made some snarky comments, of course. However, she booked 5-star hotel rooms for her guests in the town where the reception was held without consulting with my parents, and later submitted the bill to my parents, insisting that they pay half. My parents did not want to ruin our honeymoon period, and they genuinely liked John, so they didn't say anything to us, and paid her whatever she told them to pay. Later, when they calculated all the costs and expenses, it turned out that my parents paid for approximately 75% of our wedding, while they had no say in almost anything. My mother-in-law was essentially the one choosing the menu and the drinks, the cake, the music, etc. And she was the one taking all the leftovers home. Food and drinks, too. She organized a huge dinner, from the leftovers, at her house the next day for her friends, and John and I had to help serve the food and do the dishes afterwards, for approximately 25 people. Mind you, the wedding reception ended at around 5 a.m. on Sunday, and preparations for the dinner started at around 11 a.m. on the same day. Since the wedding was not what John and I had actually dreamed of, we just wanted to get it over with and didn't really enjoy the day. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law looked like blobfish the entire night, mainly because my brother didn't give any attention to my sister-in-law. Fast forward to 6 years ago. My sister-in-law started planning her wedding. From the very first moment, it was made clear that John would be the best man, but I would not be included in the wedding party. In our culture, it is considered rude to separate married couples, meaning that if one is asked to take part in a wedding, the spouse is to be included in one way or another. You know, tradition. I knew this was their revenge for not kicking my brother's girlfriend out of our wedding. But joke's on them, because I was actually relieved that I didn't have to put up with my sister-in-law's BS leading up to and at her wedding. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law wanted the wedding to be held in the country where we are from. Let's call it Country A, non-EU, because it was cheaper than the country we all currently live in and where the groom is from, Country B, EU. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law planned the whole thing, and they seized every single opportunity to make it clear to us that it was going to be a special, elegant, and expensive celebration, not like ours. Direct quote from my mother-in-law. They booked the venue that I wanted for my wedding, the one with the lake view. They hired 2 different decorators, one for the church and one for the reception venue, because, as my mother-in-law put it, my sister-in-law deserved that and much more. And they reserved the biggest Catholic church in the area for the ceremony, since my sister-in-law was Catholic, and it was tradition that the ceremony is held in the bride's church. Mind you, my sister-in-law never attended this church, but they told the groom's family she did. Oh, and my mother-in-law paid for my sister-in-law's dress because they didn't want the groom's family to have a say in it. And, of course, they put deposits down for everything: venue, church, decorations, hotel rooms, photographer, etc. Whenever they had the opportunity, they would rub the fact that this was going to be an extravagant event with limousines, flower decorations, and white doves, etc., in our, John's and my, face. Even though we didn't care for the things mentioned, it was very obvious they said these things to spite us. So John became frustrated and mentioned this to his mother, but she was very arrogant about it and said that my sister-in-law was her only daughter, and mothers always love their daughters more than their sons. Yes, she actually said this to her son. So my sister-in-law was entitled to everything she wanted for her big day. I was pretty upset, I must admit, because who in their right mind would say something like this to their own son? John was thinking about dropping out entirely, but we both were people pleasers at the time. We are not anymore. And after all, it was family, so we decided to let it go. Turned out we didn't even have to lift a finger for divine justice to prevail. COVID hit, and it hit hard. Borders were closed between non-EU and EU countries, and suddenly it became unclear whether my sister-in-law could have her wedding at all. My sister-in-law was understandably devastated for months, but since their wedding was scheduled for the summer, COVID restrictions were lifted somewhat, and it became possible to have their wedding in Country A, where all the deposits were already paid. Then, it turned out that since EU countries, like Country B, had harsher restrictions on large gatherings than Country A, the groom's guests were afraid of catching COVID in Country A and started canceling. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law went into panic mode. They tried everything they could to convince people to travel to Country A, but had no luck, so finally, they decided to move the whole wedding to Country B, caving to the demands of the groom's family. This meant that they lost every single deposit in Country A, because the wedding was technically not canceled due to COVID. So they didn't have enough money to pay for a similar event in Country B. Oh, and they had only 2 months to make it happen. In the end, they were only able to get a small Protestant church for the ceremony, and during the entire ceremony, the Protestant pastor who officiated the wedding was telling very rude jokes aimed at the bride due to her and my mother-in-law's behavior prior to the wedding. That's a whole different story. And they could only find a venue that was not impressive. Actually, it was not that bad. But my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were very mad that the whole thing looked cheap, and the groom's family wasn't willing to pay for an actual mansion that was in the same area but was very expensive. And then the real shocker came. Only half of the invited guests showed up. It turned out that the ones who were unwilling to go to Country A because of COVID didn't actually want to attend the wedding in the first place, and only used COVID as an excuse, so they basically ditched the whole thing. And most of the guests from Country A were unable to attend, because they didn't have the necessary COVID-related papers. See, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law relocated the wedding because they were counting on the wedding gifts as reimbursement for all their costs. But since only half of the guests attended, they did not receive as much money. So my mother-in-law was crying her eyes out because she lost a fortune on an extravagant wedding that never happened. That's how karma worked in our case, and I'd be lying if I said John and I didn't enjoy it. Love the karma. OMG, I could just picture the smiles on yours and your husband's face at the end of it all. I hope you have a wonderful and peaceful future. Gotta love karma. This is the greatest COVID wedding story in existence. I would have prayed money to be there and see mother-in-law and sister-in-law on the wedding day. Mother-in-law, my precious daughter deserves everything she wants on her special day. COVID gods. LOL, don't worry. She'll get exactly what she deserves. I, 30 female, dated a man named John from freshman year of high school to middle of freshman year of college. I proposed to him and he broke it off saying he just wasn't right for me. I respect that. I still have feelings for him, but this isn't about that for judgment, just a bit of history. My brother Kyle, 22 male, had been in college for 2 years now and confessed 3 months in their relationship that he met John at a bar and they hit it off. Well, time skipped to last month. They've been together for 2 years and John proposed on Thanksgiving. At their house, I found out later in a call. And my brother said yes. My brother asked if I would be maid of honor. I was stunned. This felt like a nightmare and I said no, hell no, and that I wasn't going to the wedding. It was held yesterday on Christmas Eve, and the only ones there were Mom and Dad, them and John's uncle to officiate the vows. Here's where I'm not sure if I'm the a-hole. They came over to brunch today, and John and my brother were being lovey-dovey, cuddling and talking to Mom and Dad about their honeymoon in Taiwan, when virus is over. And I finally asked if they'd talk about something else and how it's hard on me to hear. When my brother tried to apologize for being affectionate, I told him he should apologize for making me see my ex as a brother-in-law. Mom and Dad, especially John, are claiming I'm being an a-hole while I'm arguing it's my right to be upset. Am I the a-hole? Added info. John is 31 years old. I did express my feelings to my brother when he confessed about their relationship, but he told me I can't just call dibs on a guy. And John and I never had S during our relationship. Extra info. My brother just called me to say that he knows about this and commented using a throwaway account, and that he and John talked and are going no contact with me for a while. John was also on the call and told me that my brother is having a panic attack for me, and now I'm really not sure if I'm truly not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It doesn't matter that he is gay. In my opinion, there are social norms where you don't date your friends' exes, and you certainly don't date your family members' exes. You dated for about 4.5 years. It's not like it was a short-term relationship. That is not something that is easy to have thrown in your face every time your family gets together. Softly, you're the a-hole. You weren't his type for slightly more obvious reasons, and people can't control who they love, as you can attest. You've had 2 years to make peace with this, and you really need to, else it's going to continue to mess up your family. They don't owe you anything. You have no ownership over this man. They deserve to be happy together. Not the a-hole. Honestly, what the duck? That's crappy of your brother on all kinds of levels. Honestly, even if you mess up the family, is this the kind of family you can count on to look out for you? Sure doesn't sound like it. Honestly, I think you should just distance yourself from all of them. Look out for yourself first, not your crappy brother and crappier ex-boyfriend. I think that all these posters saying that you're the a-hole wouldn't be saying that if this was your younger sister, rather than a gay relationship. I, 29 female, am currently planning my wedding to my fiancé Mark, 37 male. Mark comes from a wealthy family. Parents paid for all 4 kids' private schools, college education, and cars growing up. So obviously it was a little bit of a surprise when Mark told me his parents refused to chip in for our wedding, when the dream wedding I was planning wasn't financially possible on our own. My own parents don't have much in savings, so obviously they also assumed Mark's parents would help. Recently, we attended Mark's sister Hannah's, 25 female, wedding. Destination wedding, all-inclusive resort, 100+ guests. It was honestly the dream wedding I had in mind before Mark told me that I had to scale it down, since his parents weren't going to help us. During the wedding, I was talking to Hannah about how it was amazing and was wonderful how she could even afford this, because both her and her wife are in grad school. And she said her parents, my in-laws, paid entirely. So basically they had 6 figures to spend on their daughter's wedding, but can't spare a dime on their sons. I immediately left the wedding and flew home alone early because I was so heartbroken for our wedding and Mark, since his parents would treat him this poorly. Later, when I brought up their clear favoritism and stinginess to Mark and his parents, they were extremely rude and reminded me how Mark and his ex-wife chose for help on their down payment years ago instead of their wedding. So technically, they already helped Mark and won't be paying for our wedding now. I think it's completely unfair that they would not consider the new circumstances and want the best for their son. My family thinks I should uninvite Mark's parents because clearly they don't care enough about him in comparison to their other children and are holding something from almost a decade ago over his head when we are in need of help. When I brought this up to Mark, he called me an a-hole and said I just need to get over it and understand that he's not going to fight his parents over money, especially over just a wedding, which hurt me a lot. Personally, no one else in my life, family or friends, thinks I'm in the wrong because his parents are more than capable of helping and are being petty about his divorce. But am I the a-hole because Mark's family thinks so? You're the a-hole. By your logic, if Mark gets divorced again, they should have to shell out for an infinite number of weddings to let each bride have their dream. You're not their child. Mark is. He already got assistance from them. You're the a-hole. Stop counting other people's money. They've already spent Mark's wedding fund on a down payment for him. You don't deserve a wedding extravaganza just because they are wealthy. You're the a-hole. Mark's parents already gave him a sum of money for his first marriage. They are paying for 1 marriage per child, which is not favoritism and is extremely fair. They have no obligation to fund his second marriage. You do have to get over it, and you are being an a-hole. If your dream wedding is such a big deal to you, why haven't you been saving towards it for the past 10 years? I, 22 female, have been together with Elijah, 26 male, for 1.5 years now, and we recently got engaged and decided to throw a small celebration with friends and family. Elijah joined the military when he was 20, and 1 year later, he started dating Anna, who is in the military as well. After 1.5 years of dating Anna, Anna left to another country for a mission. Nobody knew where she went or if she would ever return. Obviously, Elijah was all broken. Before dating Elijah, I asked him multiple times if he still loved Anna, and this is what he said. Anna has stayed in the past, but you, my love, you are my future, my present, and my life. Everything has been great from that moment on until now. Here's the issue. Anna has returned to the country. I could see on Elijah's face that he was shocked and didn't know what to do. Anna's return means that they will have to work together again on certain cases. I asked him again if he loved Anna, and this time he didn't answer. The next day I said, "Will you leave me now that Anna is back? Do you still love her? Please tell me the truth. If you love Anna, we can split with good memories, and no one has to know what happened. But don't put me in a position where I'm the woman who is the rebound because you couldn't get over your ex." He looked me dead in the eye, and after a minute of silence, he said, "Anna won't be a problem." Well, his colleagues threw a party where everyone brings their partner. He said, "You won't like it, so just stay home. I'll say you're ill." Mind you, Elijah has never done this before. He knows I wouldn't leave him alone, even if I don't like it. We attend the party, and Elijah keeps staring at a woman. I walk over to introduce myself to the woman, and Elijah tried to stop me. I genuinely wanted to meet his coworkers, and I wanted to pay my respect for their service. I ignored Elijah and walked to the woman, and to my surprise, it was Anna. I didn't want to make a scene, so we just talked a bit, and I left the party. Me and Elijah got into a huge fight about him not telling me that Anna would be there, and not wanting me to go to her, and him just staring at her. After this, Elijah started to get home later than usual, and he started to drink more. Sometimes he would come home totally wasted, and he even called me Anna a few times. I tried to help him, but I cannot let myself be in a situation where I'm the woman who was never actually loved. Even though it's 1.5 years later, I realized Elijah never stopped loving Anna. I called off the engagement and told Elijah, "I'm happy Anna is safe and is back in her home country and with her family. However, I cannot say the same about me. Since the day Anna has returned, you have changed. You never really loved me the way you loved her, and yet you loved me so beautiful. I wish you the best with Anna, but I wish you wouldn't have broken me the way Anna has broken you." My friends called me childish, and they say I should have supported my boyfriend with getting over Anna. They said I'm a huge a-hole for leaving at the first big obstacle. So Reddit, am I the a-hole? It seems like this is the first actual issue in your relationship, and you bailed. While you certainly aren't expected to be your partner's therapist, you surely can understand why this screwed him up emotionally, right? Girl he'd been dating was just gone. No info at all. Then is suddenly back. That would throw anyone for a loop for a time. The drinking is an issue. Him calling you Anna a few times is weird. But you make it sound like this issue only started when she suddenly appeared again, and it's been a very short amount of time. Maybe I'm reading that wrong, but if it's been a few weeks, of course he's still processing. Is he in therapy? Is he trying anything to deal with the situation? A person really can't help how they feel in the moment, but they can address it. If he's trying to do that, like actual good faith effort, and you bailed, then that's such an awful thing to do. If this has been going on for ages, or he's not doing anything to address the obvious issue, then it's fair to say, I'm done. Edit. OP cleared up some time frame confusion, and she's absolutely not the a-hole given that. I understand he needs time. I got him a therapist multiple times. I talked with him so many times, and this has been going on for 1.5 months or something. The first weeks were rough, yes, but it didn't get any better. Elijah wouldn't even eat the food that I cooked at one point. He wouldn't hug me or talk back. He refused therapy and went rogue. He would drive off whenever I'd try to talk to him about just anything. Not the a-hole. They are horrible friends. You don't want to be a third wheel to your own marriage, and that's exactly what you'd be. I'm glad you were strong enough to see it and leave. Not the a-hole. Anna isn't an obstacle. She is a living, breathing person who your ex still has feelings for. You can't help him through that. He needs to do the work himself, alone. You shouldn't have to be the third wheel in your relationship, now or ever. If his grieving Anna now that she is back is harming you and your relationship, then you have every right to step away. You shouldn't have to compete with what was. I'm an HR manager for a small software company. We set up benefit plans for small businesses to offer their employees. Early in 2020, when the virus hit, we went remote. Around the same time, we needed to hire a benefits analyst. I interviewed about 20 people and gravitated towards this guy, John. He's in his early 30s. He didn't have a lot of direct experience, but he had a lot of tangible experience and transferable skills. I really liked his mindset and the way he carried himself, so I decided to take a chance on him and hired him. Guy picked up our line of work almost immediately. He quickly became the best analyst. He was really good at pairing different benefits together to maximize the return for our clients. They loved him, management loved him, and I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I got a nice bonus. They quickly gave him a better sounding title and a pretty big pay raise. That wasn't unheard of, but it usually didn't happen this quickly. Then the other shoe dropped. In May of 2021, we decided to bring people back to the office. Our company is mostly staffed with middle-aged people who are all about the office culture, so it was a pretty popular decision. There were some complaints, but everyone agreed to come back. Except John. He flatly refused to come back. I talked to him. Management talked to him. Nothing. He said, "I'm working from home, and I'll continue doing so until you shut off my access." Management has a meeting about it, decided they can't fire him. He's too good at what he does. It only got worse. In 2022, we weren't having the best time financially, so we changed the OT structure. It used to be 1.5 times your hourly rate, 2 times if it's on weekends, and 5% bonus on any deals concluded. We changed it to 1.5 flat. John goes from being willing and able to work all the overtime required to just a few hours of OT a month, and none on weekends. He also pretty regularly stops working during business hours because of his kids. He lets his kids interrupt meetings and will stop paying attention in the meeting to listen to his kids. Finally, our boss has a formal meeting. "John, your son interrupted our meeting, and you blew me off to listen to a story about a doggy he saw. This is unacceptable. We already make allowances for you. You can't stop working to pick up your kids in the middle of the day." John says his family is more important than his work, and besides, he's still the top analyst in the company. Again, flatly refuses requests from management. Management is now telling me it's my decision, but they can't let any of the other workers get leeway like John. I've already had conversations with some about the accommodations like John gets. It's either fire him and hire someone inferior to make sure the company runs the way management wants, or start making arrangements for other employees. Would I be the a-hole if I fired him? You're the a-hole, but go ahead and fire him. He'll find another, better gig, one where they don't arbitrarily change set OT rules and then get angry when people aren't willing to work OT, and one where they realize not everything has to be according to some SOP written 50 years ago. Not the a-hole, if he really will drop everything to cater to his kids during work hours. Even when working from home, work hours equals working. That being said, you also have to understand that the vast majority of people who can perform their job from home will prefer that option these days, so you are unlikely to find someone who'd be willing to come to the office and work overtime for peanuts. You would not be the a-hole. Management is already an a-hole for making exceptions for one employee. I get that he's good at his job, but how does it affect team morale when John gets an exception? At the end of the day, you either require employees to work in the office or you don't. If it's required and he doesn't do it, then he's not meeting the expectations of the role. I, 28 female, and my fiancé, we'll call Brian, 30 male, are currently planning our wedding, and my younger sister, we'll call Mary, 14 female, is opposed to it, so she's planning on objecting. Why is she opposed? Because she's uncomfortable with the age gap in our relationship. My fiancé and I met 5 years ago through mutual friends, and never before that. We were friends for 2 years before I asked him out, and now we're planning on getting married in the summer. When we announced our engagement to my family about 4 months ago, Mary screeched in horror. She started screaming about how because he's so much older, it's suspicious he wants to marry me. And she kept saying, "How old were you when he was 18? Huh? 16? We were all taken aback, and were very confused by her outburst. I reminded her that Brian and I didn't meet until I was 23 years old, and we were both working professionals. She just kept repeating the fact that when he was 18, I was 16. My older sister, 30 female, pointed out that her husband, 31 male, is almost 2 years older than her, and my stepdad, 45 male, pointed out that our mom, 50 female, is 5 years older, and a difference of a few years in a relationship is normal in adult relationships. This only further upset Mary, and she started repeatedly pointing out how old my sister and her dad, my stepdad, were when their respective partners were 18 years old. Fast forward. My mom and stepdad have talked with Mary a few times about the differences between young teenagers dating older people and adults dating people a few years older. My mom told my older sister and I that it's not about Brian or anyone specifically, but she's really struggling to understand the difference between a 28-year-old dating a 30-year-old and a 15-year-old dating an 18-year-old or older. And now she's violently against our sister's, and our parents' relationships because we're with partners of different ages. And apparently, Mary is planning on objecting and causing a scene at the wedding. Since no one else understands how wrong this is, she'll make us. This is where I might be the a-hole. She's been talking about doing this for months, until I finally snapped and told her that since she can't listen to reason and be respectful, she's uninvited to the wedding. My mom thinks it's going too far by uninviting Mary from the wedding. Mary is just young and learning, and that's no reason to uninvite her for my wedding. I, however, don't want my wedding ruined by a chronically online teen. And because I know some people will ask, Mary doesn't have any diagnosed disabilities and nothing to our knowledge that would cause her to struggle so much with social rules. This is the first time she's done anything like this. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Is something else going on here with her? It sounds crazy that she's so violently against such a tiny age gap. When you said she was so opposed, I had to go back and double-check your ages. She clearly has an issue here, but your wedding is not the place for her to make a stand, so I think you're well allowed to uninvite her. Maybe allow her at the reception, but no way should she be allowed at your ceremony. Not the a-hole. At first, I thought your sister is jealous of your relationship with your husband, or maybe even has a crush on him. Or maybe she was interested in a guy 2 years older than her, and he told her she's too young, so now she's fixated on that. It would be a shame if you had to uninvite her from the wedding, but I wouldn't blame you. Have your parents considered taking her to a therapist? Maybe she'd have an easier time talking this through with someone outside the family.